I'll just switch my video off.
Yeah, please, if you want, if you like, you can.
It interferes with my signal, so.
Yeah, that's probably a wise move. Okay, so we reached lecture 8 now, in this introductory course to classical Greek. And today we are introduced to a new tense, which is the future. And we begin digging into the third declension nouns as well. In today's lecture, we will concentrate on third declension nouns with stems ending either in a so-called labial consonant or in a velar consonant. What this means we will return to, but first let us begin with the future tense. What is a future, we may ask first. Basically, the future is a tense which expresses that some action or happening will take place in the future. In modern English and also in Swedish and German, we use so-called auxiliary verbs to construct phrases in the future tense. So, for instance, the present indicative "I run" can be turned to a future indicative by adding the auxiliary verb I will run. Likewise, in Swedish, we can add the auxiliary verb skall to a phrase in the present indicative. Jag springer thus becomes jag skall springa. And in German, we can add a form of werden to the phrase ich renne, and thus get the future ich werde rennen. Actually, auxiliary verbs are used to form the future tense in modern Greek as well. Thus, I run is trecho in modern Greek, which is the same as in classical Greek. But I will run is ta trexo. So here the auxiliary verb is fa. Of course, we can also use the present tense to express future action. If we add a specific adverb of time to make it clear that the action will take place in the future. Like, for instance, in the sentence, if I run tomorrow, I could injure myself again. And in classical Greek, it's also possible to use the present tense to express future action in this way. However, in classical Greek, there are also specific verb forms with which future actions can be expressed independently. And in fact, the auxiliary verbs are not used at all in the formation of the future tense. So, how is a verb in the future formed in classical Greek? To answer this question, it's best that we again turn to our example verb, paideuo. So this is how the first person singular future indicative active looks like of this verb. The basic principle for the construction of future forms of verbs in classical Greek, and this rule applies both to the active and the middle voice, is to place a sigma between the verb stem or root of the verb, and then add the person endings after this sigma infix or suffix, whatever you like. The endings are then the same as in the present active and medial passive. However, and this is an important point to note, the passive future forms look different from the medial future forms, since they are formed in a different way than the active and the medial future. But we will look at the formation of the passive future in later lectures. As I said, this is the way future active and medium indicatives are formed. Importantly, the endings are the same as in the present tense. Thus, the counterpart of the present tense paideuo is paideuso in the future tense. Unfortunately, however, it's not always as simple as this. That is, it's not always just the addition of a sigma to the root which marks a verb as a future. In many cases, the addition of this futural sigma infix also causes changes in the root of the verb. In particular, it's often so that verbs with stems ending in vowels undergo a lengthening of the concluding vowel in their roots as a result of the addition of the sigma infix. You see examples of this on the screen. Thus, agapao, meaning I love in the present indicative active, becomes agapeso in the corresponding future indicative form. And iamai, I cure, in the present medial indicative, becomes iasamai with the long alpha in the future tense. In the same way, miseo, I hate, becomes miseso, I will hate. And klero, I feel, becomes kleroso. The reason why the concluding alpha in the future form of agapao becomes an eta, while the alpha at the end of the stem of the future form of iaomai remains an alpha is due to the same principle that we by now may have grown accustomed to. That is, that in Attic Greek, a long alpha usually remains fixed when preceded by an iota, a rho, or an epsilon, but changes into an eta when preceded by any other letter. Okay, the time has now come for the full parodying of the future indicative active. And for the sake of variety, we can, instead of paideuo, concentrate on the last verb in our list here. That is plero, I feel. If we inflect plero in the active future indicative, we get pleroso in the first person singular, pleroses in the second person singular, plerose in the third person singular, plerosomen in the first person plural, plerosete in the second person plural, and plerosusin in the third person plural. So these are, as we can see, actually the very same endings as in the present active indicative. Also, the so-called thematic vowels, epsilon or omicron, that fall between the stem and the ending are the same in the present and in the future. Only the sigma infix between the stem and the thematic vowel allows us to conclude that the tense is in fact future. Moreover, also the future active indicative has in fact the same ending as its present active counterpart, plerose or plerose. But let's take the medial forms next. The endings here are also identical with the present tense, so that we get plerosomai in the first person singular, plerose or plerose in the second person singular, plerosetai in the third person singular, plerosometha in the first person plural pleroseste in the second person plural, and plerosontai in the third person plural. And the future medial infinitive is plerosestai, which again is identical with the present variant, apart from the fact that there is a contraction in the present medial infinitive, which causes this form to be plerustai rather than pleroestai. But we will deal more thoroughly with contracted verb forms in connection with the later lecture. Now, if you thought that we already handled all the different ways the future can be formed from the present stem, you were unfortunately wrong. In some cases, as in paideuso, when the stem ends with the diphthong, the final vowel is not lengthened at all. And the only thing that happens is that the sigma infix is added to the stem. So there's no difficulty here. But as we saw, if the stem ends with a short vowel, that vowel usually is lengthened. But this is not always the case either. So, for instance, the active future indicative of pleo, I sail, is pleuso. Or actually, the future form of this verb is much more common in the middle voice, pleusomai. But in this case, the irregular future forms are explained by the historical loss of an original letter, which had fallen out of use in the classical age. This letter was once the sixth letter of the Greek alphabet, and it was called digamma because it looked like two gammas, and it was pronounced like a woo sound. So accordingly, the present active indicative pleo was once pleuo, and this original semi-diphthong-like sound is then maintained in the future forms of the verb, also in the classical age. Okay, but then we also have all the many verb stems ending with consonants. What happens with these in the future? Here we have to set up some categories. So first off, we have the stems that end with the labial consonant. The name labial comes from the Latin labum, which means lips. So this would be the consonants I form with my lips. In Greek, these consonants are represented by phi, beta, and phi. And when they occur at the end of a verb stem, they turn into psi when combined with the futural sigma infix. Thus, the future indicative of leipo, I leave, is leipso. And the future form of blapto, I heard, is in turn blapso. And this because the stem here is actually blub. Likewise, in grapho, which has a stem ending in phi, this becomes grapso in the future. Okay, next we have the stems ending in velar consonants. The term velar derives from the Latin velum, which means sail. So these are the consonants I form by placing my tongue against the roof of my mouth. In Greek, these consonants are kappa, gamma, and chi. when any of these consonants stand at the end of the verb stem, and when they combine with the futural sigma, they turn into a xi. Thus, we get from dioko, I chase, diokso in the future tense. And tatto becomes taxo, because here the original stem was tag. And when the gamma at the end of the stem meets the futural sigma, it turns into a xi. And from dechomai, I receive, we get dexomai. Okay. Then we have on our list, finally, the dental consonants, which have been named after the Latin dens, meaning tooth. Accordingly, these are the consonants I form with the tongue against or between my teeth. In Greek, these consonants are represented by tau, delta, and theta. Actually, when any of these consonants meet the futural sigma infix, they disappear completely. Hence, we get from anito, I accomplish, aniso, and in the same vein, pseudo, I cheat, becomes pseuso, and peitho, I persuade, becomes peiso. But that concludes our survey of how the future is formed in classical Greek. It should be noted, however, that this was not a conclusive overview. These were just some main rules, and there's, of course, always also exceptions to them. Some exceptions that can be mentioned include the future indicative of the verb trecho, which is I run in both classical and modern Greek. However, the regular active future form trexo, which we encounter in modern Greek, does not occur in classical Greek. Instead, we have two variants in the future medial. On the one hand, we have trexomai, which is formed of the same stem as the present. But on the other hand, we also have the medial future form drameomai, where the stem is in fact entirely different than in the present tense. This kind of extreme variation in stems between the present and the future is not very common. What is quite common, however, is that verbs that have an active form in the present only exist in the medium voice in the future. But let's now turn to the third declension nouns that we have on our agenda today. These are the nouns which have stems ending in a labial or a velar consonant. One example of each of these will be enough for us today. So we use as examples here gyps, which means vulture, and salpings, which means trumpet. What is noteworthy for these groups of nouns, that is for the third declension nouns with roots ending in a labial or velar, is that all nouns of this type end with an S sound in the nominative singular. And when this S sound combines with the final consonant in the stem of the noun ending changes either to a C or xi, depending on whether the final consonant of the stem is a labial or a velar. So GYPS is the outcome of the labial root GYP meeting the sigma of the nominative singular ending, while salpings is the result of the velar stem salping meeting the concluding sigma. By the way, a gamma followed by a gamma, so a double gamma, is pronounced as and also if a gamma is followed by a xi, we get a sound. So that's good to keep in mind. But if we go to the paradigms, this is how the paradigm for the inflection of GYPS vulture looks like. You may note that the stem of the noun GYP is visible in all other forms, except in the nominative singular and the dative plural. Since in these two forms, there has been a contraction of P and sigma, resulting in C. But if you go through the full paradigm, we have here in the singular, GYPS in the nominative, GYPOS in the genitive, GYPI in the dative, GYPA in the accusative, and GYPS in the vocative. And in the plural, we have GYPES in the nominative, GYPON in the genitive, GYPSIN in the nominative, GYPON I already said, but then we have GYPAS in the accusative and GYPES in the vocative. The reason why some of the forms have a circumflex over the letter epsilon is that the epsilon is long in these forms. But if you turn to the next paradigm, we have here the example representing the third declension nouns ending in velar consonants. And you can also find this paradigm, but with another example now in the Cambridge grammar on page 48. So 48, section 435. But here we have, if you go through the paradigm again, salpings in the nominative singular, salpingos in the genitive, salpingi in the dative, salpinga in the accusative, and salpings again in the vocative. And in the plural, we have salpinges in the nominative, salpingon in the genitive, salpingsin in the dative, salpingas in the accusative, and salpinges in the vocative. So here again, the stem of the noun is clearly visible in all numbers and cases, except for the nominative singular and the dative plural. And what we may note further, and this in fact applies to nouns in the third declension, ending in a velar or labial in general, is that the alpha in the accusative plural ending is short. So this this alpha here short, salpingas, and also here GYPAS, this alpha is short. But yeah, that's all that we had today. So the future tense is the major new thing that we'll be dealing with now and in the text as well. Next chapter of the textbook.
Should come back now.
Yeah, I stopped sharing. So
Video's back.
Yeah, have you had time to? Any questions, by the way?
No questions. I just have to go through them again and again to try and remember them.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that important. All the terms I use and, you know, all the grammatical categories that I mentioned, it's not like super important to remember them all. It's more like they have to be presented somehow, and then I think it's important that you mention the grammatical categories. But I mean, the main thing is that you somehow understand how they work when you read the text, and then if you find that some grammar is useful for you to understand the text, then of course it might be worthwhile concentrating on that. And I always say that it's like it's not that you have to learn everything, but to try to learn some paradigms at least.
Yeah.
Each time would be like super important, because the more paradigms you know, the easier and faster you're going to be able to read Greek. So I mean, each lecture I go through 2 or 3, sometimes 4 paradigms. So if you can even try to memorize as well as possible one of these that I go through in each lecture, that would already be like a huge benefit. So for and this is like, of course, I say this to everyone who's listening to this recording, not only to you. That's my advice. Try to learn paradigms and try to learn vocabulary. That would be like, that's the best way. But I mean, you already know, for instance, quite well. Great.
Some of it. Yeah.
The future, you're probably already, future tense, you are probably quite familiar with. How are you, Christina, by the way? I didn't see that you had arrived. Oh, at work. Cool. Yeah, but if you have time, we could try to look at the chapter that we had.
Yes.
So we had chapter 5 last time. So this time we would move on to chapter 6. Oh. So if I share the screen again, we get it from here. Yeah, it was this about the Athenians, the piety or godliness or piety of the Athenians. So that would be the title here. Heton Athenaion Theosebeia, the piety of the Athenians. So yeah, let's try our hands on this one then. Nigel, would you like to attempt this first sentence here?
So, in Athens, there was an altar on which was the following: to the unknown God. So
Exactly.
To the unknown gods.
Exactly. So you had rightly or correctly understood this these capital letters here as referring to a single God. So agnosto theo. So this concluding iota here, if this would be written in small letters, then that concluding iota would be underneath this omega here as an iota subscript. So if you remember, I said that if you find a iota subscript in the concluding syllable in a noun form, then it's with a high probability it's going to be a dative singular form. So this is also a dative singular form. So this is like a so-called proper dative. So it's just gives expression to for whom the action or something is performed. So here's just, as you said, for the unknown God, or to the unknown God, because there's no sentence there actually, it's just an inscription. So I suppose this is a real inscription that is using.
Yes, it is in the Agora.
Yeah. It's only all the inscriptions, almost all the inscriptions that he has gathered, who wrote this book in the early 20th century. He uses real inscriptions as the basis. So yeah. Very good. And Christina, have you had time to look at this chapter? can see the chat now. Would you like to try this this second sentence? Oh yeah, you've been moving your house, yeah. But maybe we can just continue with Nigel.
Okay.
If you have time.
So for the Athenians were great. Now, when we did, well, I'm just an aside. When you do the past tense in the, I've forgotten the damn name of it now, but this past tense here, the imperfect.
Yeah.
We were taught when we were doing Latin that it was a, we wouldn't say they feared, we would say they were fearing or they were worshipping. In Greek, I'm not sure. So would you translate it as they were greatly worshipping or they greatly worship?
Yeah, I mean, in general, the imperfect, I think I mentioned this also in the lecture that we had on the imperfect. In general, the imperfect in Greek is best translated as you said, that it's an ongoing action in the past. So then if someone was, for instance, being pious, or if someone was looking at something, it's not he looked at it. It would rather be if it were he was looking. Exactly.
So the Athenians.
But in this case, I mean, since now we only have had the imperfect, it's the only past tense that we had so far. So probably the most natural way of translating many of these imperfects would still be with a simple past English equivalent. But I mean, it's up to you, probably. But yeah.
Yeah, because if you take it literally, it would be for the Athenians were greatly worshipping the gods.
Yeah.
Or revering the gods.
Exactly.
So they had many. They had both many temples and altars.
Yeah. Yeah. That I mean, that's a completely viable translation, I think. Here, it's a bit difficult actually to translate this host here. Usually it's a conjunction, which means so that. But here it's a bit difficult maybe in English to translate it with so that in this case.
Yeah.
But it's an well, as you translated it, it probably works quite well. So that they had. So yeah, this if you would analyze this this neo here, what number is it?
It's plural. First person plural.
It's just plural. It's not actually, because it's a noun. Then when you analyze it,
of course, yes.
if you give the case, the number, and the gender. Usually.
Yeah, it's
case and number is usually also just enough.
That's right. Yeah, no, my mind is. It's a
nominative or a case.
It's nominative plural.
Exactly, it's nominative plural. It's one of these that we had last time. This so-called Attic second declension nouns. So that's why it looks very much like or actually it's formally identical with an dative singular. Yeah. That's the special thing about this Attic second declensions. But you can deduce from the fact that it connects to this adjective polloi, which is in the nominative plural masculine. You can deduce that it's also a nominative plural masculine form. So that there were many temples and altars there.
Yeah.
So the Athenians worshipped the gods. How did you translate this swadra?
I said greatly. Or
greatly.
Greatly revered, I suppose. Or
greatly revered. The Athenians revered the gods greatly, and then it's a bit difficult to translate this, but if you translate it literally, so that they had many temples and altars there, or that so that there were many temples and altars there. But it's not very it's not a very easy sentence to translate into English, I don't think. So you did a good work. Okay, what would you like to continue with this first sentence then?
So this got me a little bit confused because Athena is feminine, but Theon is masculine.
Yeah, actually, Theos is, of course, the nominative form. It can be both
Masculine
and feminine.
Okay.
So in this case, it's
feminine.
It's feminine.
Yeah.
Because as you saw, it had this definite article in the feminine form here, feminine accusative form. Yeah.
So I said, and the people. So I took the Holeos first, and the people did the most service to the god Athene, or worshipped her the most, I suppose. And they carried many gold and silver gifts into her temple.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then, how does it continue?
And then, and the maidens carried baskets on their heads. And then I said, in her feast, during her feasts, I wasn't sure.
Yes, here, entais heortais thesteo.
In the festivals, I suppose, in her festival. Yeah.
So in the goddesses' festivals.
Yeah.
Or in the festivals of the goddess.
Yeah. They carried baskets on their heads, and then the baskets were full with I wasn't quite sure of what that was. The A.
This ha.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So this is a relative pronoun.
Yeah.
So it would mean either which or who.
Okay.
So it refers back to something
to the baskets.
To the baskets, exactly.
Yeah. So I translate it as that in which were full of flour and bread and fruits of the land.
Yeah, exactly. Which were full of what? How did you translate this, alphiton?
I thought that was flour.
Flour, exactly.
Yes.
Flour and
bread and fruits of the land.
Yes. So ektes horas, of the land, and then we have here horaion, fruits. Yeah. So these are all in the genitive plural, these forms.
That's from Plato, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, actually, I would say that they are like partitive. No, sorry, not partitive, but partitive genitives. So it's like these baskets were full of this. So it's like this flour and this bread and these fruits. They're sort of the whole of which that which is the basket, that which is in the basket forms a part. So that makes them like as partitive genitives. So a partitive genitive gives expression to the whole of which some head word forms a part. So the head word here would be this relative pronoun ha. Well, or actually there is no head word here. It's just sort of like implied.
Yeah.
I don't think you can't say that in English. I mean, you can't say the land, the baskets were full of the fruits or of the bread. the baskets were full of the fruits and the bread of the land. Maybe you can say it like that. You can say it. You can. Yeah. So it's possible also in English. Yeah. So yeah, this ha. What case is it in? This relative pronoun ha.
I couldn't work it out.
So it's like it's kana. Kana is what? Let me see this. Let me actually check, and if I had it in the vocabulary list. Vocabulary should be vocabulary 6, right? But where do you have vocabulary 6 now?
I think it was, if you go up a bit, I saw.
I had vocabulary
just
5
above,
and,
just above the, they're just
yeah.
above that. Yeah.
So the basic form is kanon, right? So
Yes.
this is
Okay.
it's a neuter. So this is a plural.
Yeah. Plural neuter. Okay.
Plural neuter. And that's in the accusative case in this case. So that's just a good way of knowing what, or from that, when you know what case it is, in what number it is in, and so on, a relative pronoun. From that you can refer what or deduce which word in the preceding clause it refers to actually. So that can sometimes be useful. But let's go back to the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So far you translated it without any sort of problems whatsoever, completely correctly. And this is not a very easy text either. So let's see if we can make it to the
end.
Then if you start here, toigar un.
Okay, so therefore, or because of that, I mean, it's as a result, it's because they gave her presents that this happened. So I presume you could translate it as a result.
Yeah.
The goddess was gracious and both gracious and well-minded to the people.
Yeah.
Or to them.
Yeah. So if this hautais would refer to the
people of Athens. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I think it actually refers to. It refers to these maidens actually, because it's
the maidens. Okay.
It's in the feminine, right? It's a feminine personal pronoun in the date. So therefore, the goddess was how did you translate Hileos again?
Gracious.
Gracious and
well-minded. Both. Gracious and well-minded.
Exactly. Yeah. Well-minded or well-disposed or something like that.
Yeah, well-disposed to them.
Both of them probably work. Yeah. So haitas must refer to the maidens.
Maidens. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, last sentence then.
Okay, and other gods were both gracious and well disposed to the Athenians, and can't read my writing here. Oh yeah, and this I found, but other gods were both gracious and well disposed to Athenians, and I took part in feasts. I wasn't that I.
Yeah. Yeah, it must mean that they took part in the feast or in the festival.
In the feast, yeah.
So it was
in the festival.
The other gods were also well-minded and gracious to the Athenians, and they also took part in the festival. That's what it said here. actually. So this meteichon is what tense is it in?
It's imperfect.
Imperfect, exactly.
Yeah.
So echo is one of these verbs which has an irregular imperfect form.
Yeah.
So in it, the augment is not, as would be expected, an prolonged e sound. So it's not echon, but it's the diphthong echon.
Yeah.
And then we have, of course, here in met echo, we have the prepositional prefix. So this meta is a preposition which comes before this echo, which is the actual verb part of the verb. So in this case, when we have an imperfect, then we have the augment falls in between the preposition. The preposition is this meta, and the verb is this echo. So the augment, which indicates that it's an imperfect, falls in between here. But in this case also it's an irregular augment. So that's why it's not an eta, a prolonged or a longer version of epsilon, but an a. But then we have, of course, this typical imperfect ending, this one, which can be either a first person singular or a third person plural. But in this case, third person plural, right? Because it's this the subject is this hoi alloi theoi, so the other gods. And then this kai here, which usually means and, is of course a bit difficult maybe to translate here.
I could say indeed or something, or
yeah, indeed, maybe, yeah. Indeed, also the other gods. You can translate it in different ways. I mean, when you then, if you would really try to make an fluent translation of this, you would, of course, first maybe produce a more literal translation, and then you would try to write the more fluent idiomatic version after that. So yeah, but yes, I mean, I think this was maybe the most difficult text we've had so far. So even though it was quite short, it had quite a few tricky sentences, especially this one in the middle, which started here, then the theon, and then ended actually ended here. So yeah, but yeah, good work. You're working your way through this 100-year-old Swedish textbook, quite efficiently. So any questions or comments? Christina, did you understand anything? Were you here, or did you catch anything of our translations? Well, maybe you already. Oh, good to hear. So yeah, I think the next one will actually be a bit easier. So the next chapter will be a bit easier, and it will contain quite a few future forms. So if you want to translate, practice, recognizing future form, which is really quite good to do. Just be confronted with them in the text, and the next chapter is going to be good. It's going to be easier than this chapter 6, which maybe could have at this point he could have added somewhat easier text as well. But it's good to practice also with it more. This is the thing that I actually like about this textbook, is that it's not too easy, because it's when you are then confronted with sort of real original Greek text, it's not going to be that super easy either. It's like if you have an textbook which is too easy, which has introduced you to classical Greek, then it's the shock you move to the original text is bound to be significant, I think. So, but yeah, but if you want to use some other material on the side, it's good as well, actually. But yeah, thanks for this
Thank you.
session, and it was a pleasure, and hope to see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good night.
Good night.